I'm sorry, this isn't going. So we're not going to talk about UX writing today. We're going to talk about writing about design. This is why you're here, because this is about process. It's about practice, everything that you do, how to tell that story. So here are the 4 topics we're going to be covering. It's not the basics. I'm not going to teach you how to use commas. It's why you should be writing about design, why it's so hard that I'm here to talk about it, what design stories you should be telling, and then how you can do the thing. So why bother? There are a few benefits here that make writing about design worth the designer's while. I know that writing is hard. I did my bachelor's degree in it. Thank you, Mom, for helping that happen. It's not easy, but it's really worth it for designers because you get to tell your story. You get to create the brand of the designer you want to be. That will help you get better jobs. And like, thank you to Corona, we all need that. And it will help you ultimately become better at what you do. So how do you define your process with writing, excuse me? When we think about design, at least for me and a lot of my friends, your designers are very visual people. So you see what you need. You can understand when you look at a screen what should go where. But when you write, that's not enough. So writing about design helps you put words on these visual concepts. That helps you become more eloquent, and it helps you do the next thing, which is tell your story. When you see your work and you create work on a screen, that won't speak for itself. When it comes to a job interview or presenting your portfolio or giving a talk, you can't just show the work that you've done. That won't be enough. Instead, putting words on the work that you've done will help explain your process, and that's what makes you a great designer. Not just the things that you know how to create, but also the things that you can explain, the teamwork that you've done, the way you know how to collaborate with other designers, the way that you can implement research theory. These are all very important elements of the design process that you don't see when you look at a screen. So this is something that was created by Sarah Doody. It's the Career Project Diary. And the reason it's here is because Sarah came up with an idea, process, that every time you work on a design project, you write it down. Everything you do, you write it down. You take 15 minutes a week, and you write at the end of the week what you worked on and how it went, because none of us are perfect. None of us have perfect memories. So when you can work with a Career Project Diary, you can call back to that in a job interview when you're updating your portfolio and see what you've done and also where you've improved, just to know for yourself. So this leads into getting a better job. There are so many designers, and obviously none of them are as good as you are, but it's hard to stand out in this crowd, especially the more crowded that Fiverr gets, 99 designs, all of these websites that they do pose a threat for people who don't understand. So the way to get better jobs that will pay you more and that will challenge you more is to know how to explain your work and talk not just about yourself, but about the things that you do. And that's how you become a better designer. When you write things out, whether it's just having a journaling practice, 3 pages in the morning, like so many people do, or writing design blog posts, you start to identify patterns in your work. So whether that means that you understand that you're jumping from A to C, but you don't take that B step, or that you just haven't thought about how to get out of a certain situation that now that you're writing, you see as possible. All of these options that you're bringing up to yourself, having to entertain them and to solve them is what will help you become a better designer through writing. So why is it so hard? There's this quote by a man named Martin Mull, who it says, as you can see here, writing about music is like dancing about architecture. But here, music is design. Writing about design doesn't come naturally. We design about design, we play music about music. So when we're trying to put words on a concept that is visual, of course we're going to struggle. So when it comes to blog post writing, this is how the process goes. First, we come up with an idea. The best thing to write about, whether you're writing poetry or blog posts or anything else, is to write about what you know. So here, take projects that you're working on, something that interests you, maybe a career change, The places where designers struggle with writing are when they try to write about something they don't understand. So if someone sees that design systems are a hot topic and they want to write about design systems, but their wheelhouse is user research, let someone else write about design systems and show us what you know about research. Come up with an idea. And then the next step is outline. So what I mentioned earlier about becoming a better designer by learning how to see the common thread in your stories and to build out your ideas, this is where you do that. So by building your story, you start with an introduction. This is where you show why you're the person to tell this story, and you explain the story you're about to tell. And then the body. So this is the important part. These are the action items. This is where I get stuck. I should be spending almost all of my reading time on the body of the post. And then the conclusion, which is just summing it up. Drafting is just writing. I don't have that much to say. You fill in the outline and you make it something I can read as an editor. And then you send it to the editor. This is assuming that you want to go to a publication, not Medium, but something like Prototyper, UX Collective, maybe Inside Design. You send your draft to an editor. You can also send it to a friend if you want to upload it on Medium or LinkedIn and just need someone's opinion. This, the editing stage, is really emotionally challenging, having been an editor and been edited. There are sometimes tears, very few laughs. It's a lot of work, and it can feel Sisyphean because you change the comma and you change the order, but a good edit can make a post sing. One of my favorite posts I edited at Envision was about a user research tactic written by a doctor in Latvia who, I don't want to say she spoke no English, but she spoke very little English, but this theory was amazing. So what do we do when someone's written about this theory that no one else has covered, but it's bad? So I printed out her story and I sat on the floor that you can see behind me, and I literally cut it out with scissors and reordered it. And it was our highest performing post that month. It was so worth the effort that took from my end and from hers, because people needed that knowledge. It just took the time to go back and forth. And then you party because you're published and you're proud of yourself, and I'm proud of you. Good work. So how do you decide now what story you should be telling? The best design stories are actionable, they're focused, and they're personal. Actionable means that no matter what's about, the reader comes out and knows how to do something new. So for example, this post by Timur Pomerantz is about the process of implementing a design system at SimilarWeb, which is a huge company. Timur was working there and he built the system from the ground up. In this post, and I can send everyone the link after, it's a fantastic one, he goes step by step from getting stakeholder sign-off to start the project all the way through the final implementation and pressing play. And what's important here is that I was able to take this post and show it to my manager and say, this is what our design system building process is going to look like. And that was it. There's no complication in here. It's plug and play in the best way. Then the next is being focused. Again, we don't rely on our work to speak for itself because it can't. We focus in on a very small niche and we figure out what kind of magic we can do there with words. So here, for example, another post about research. Lade wanted to write about research, but she didn't know what. That's her background, but she was having trouble identifying her angle. So we worked together and we looked through her past projects, and she'd worked on something about guerrilla research. So here she was able to write, I think it was 1,500 words about the guerrilla research development process. What's interesting about guerrilla research here, just as an aside, is that it's something you can do almost without money. So by taking a really niche project, going step by step through how you can make that work, and giving such a focused action item at the end that someone could do it with no budget, Lade totally won this project. She blew it out of the park. And then finally, personal. I did not intend for the same text to be on 3 slides, so I can't make an excuse for this one. Personal posts are the ones where you draw on your own experience. So here, for example, Harim Manan wrote a post about getting promoted. What's great here is that in the intro, she tells this heartbreaking story that I think most women can identify with, where the first time she filled out a performance review, she brought it to her manager, and her manager sat there and reviewed it, and he said, "This is awful." And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and he said, "You totally undersold yourself." So there's this story here about what she learned on her own, from her own struggles, that she's able to teach me and the rest of you to get promoted and to get better jobs. She's giving from herself so that we can do better. And she's uniquely qualified to tell this story because she went through it. Someone who's never tried to get promoted or had a promotion denied can't explain that same story. They can write all the guides they want, but they won't have the same power as Harim. So these are the three kinds of blog stories. And I keep specifying blog because we're going to talk about portfolios too, but that comes towards the end. So these are the three blog stories that we can tell. We can focus on the process and practice. We can focus on values and principles, or we have the opinion section. That's like in a newspaper when very smart people get to write about what they know about. So the process and practice first. Tell us, plug and play, just like Tamir did, what steps you and your team took to accomplish a goal. So here, this is how the career project diary will help you. Document all of the steps you took and then put it in an outline, and you can draft from there. I want to know when I'm reading and editing this kind of post, how something was done. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be artistic. Tell me exactly how you did the work that you did and show me how you won the project at the end. So for example, this post by Capital One, it came out exactly a week after I started working at Envision. And it was one of our highest performing posts and one of our least sexy of all time. But the reason it did so well is because they went step by step through how to build a form. Designers build forms. It's boring and it's a little bit Sisyphean, but it's what we have to do. By Capital One giving the tools and giving screenshots, explaining how to build a high-performing form with their millions of customers, they were able to create something very meaningful, even without having a degree in creative writing. The next is values and principles. So it's not just moving around lines and pixels when we're designing, right? There are things that are important, and there are things that guide all of our work. And the more that someone becomes a senior designer, the more their values are important to them. So these posts explain the reasoning behind a choice. So this is where you can go a little bit further than plug and play and explain things that guide the bigger picture ideas. So like Pablo Stanley, for example, wrote this post based on an awards talk, a talk he gave at awards. He might have given the talk first, I don't remember, but he wrote about why designing for accessibility is just designing. Pablo is a very strong advocate for accessible design and inclusive design. It's in his writing work, it's in his work at Envision as well, and the new plugin that he is working on called Blush, super cool, blush.design. And by sharing this, he was able to tell all of the people who look up to him, his, I think, 100,000 followers now on all of the socials, what designing for accessibility means to him. And by sharing what informs his practice, he's able to inform the practices of others. This could also be considered part of the opinion section, because part of what's important in the opinion section is being trusted. Not just having followers, but having experience. So like Harim, which she wrote a few posts behind us, she doesn't have a huge following, but she has that knowledge, she has that experience. This post in the opinion section, anything written here, will be from personal experience about what makes you a better designer. So this is where you'll share some kind of formative moment, something where maybe it's not plug and play, but I'll come out of it and think, maybe I'll get to that, or maybe I've already felt that, or wow, I'm happy I'm not the only one who has lived through that. So Asta Gore, for example, is a UX lead at Google. And she wrote this post about finding your first UX design job. because she also had to find her first job, right? Everyone here had to find their first job once, but also she's been hiring for UX jobs for nearly 10 years. So she's able to tell the story from both sides, and she's able to share to junior designers not only what they need to do, but also why they're valuable, giving those junior designers the tools they need to argue and negotiate for what they're worth. So I've shown you what's good, and I've shown you what's important, but how do you start? What do you do now? The first thing about writing is that you just have to do it. A notebook helps, a pen or a pencil too. There's no better way to write than just to write. I wish I had something smarter here, more informed. You just have to write. But when it comes to writing about design, you just have to write about that too. I'm sorry, it's just practice here. With that being said, there are things that can guide you. You can write on Medium, you can write on LinkedIn, you can write as a guest contributor. These are all great places to start if you don't have your own blog. So on Medium, there are pros and cons. The pro is you can publish whatever you want, whenever you want. There's no limit. No one's going to slap you on the wrist and tell you to stop writing, but that's also a con, because when you can write whatever you want, whenever you want, you won't have an editor tapping you on the shoulder saying, maybe you're writing too much and you could do better with 1 post a week instead of 12. Or maybe your posts aren't that organized. All the benefits that you get from working with someone more experienced than you don't get when you're working on Medium. But if your goal is to be prolific and your goal is to learn while doing, you won't find anything better. Next is LinkedIn. People are here for a long time, not a good time. They're the opposite of Drake. But with that being said, it's not a fun audience. It's not a place where you'll get great value from experimenting. LinkedIn people come to read about work and then they leave. So it depends on what your goals are. If you're looking for a job, for example, or you're thinking about looking for a job, building up some posts on LinkedIn could be a good help. With that being said, a pro tip here, for all of the non-native English speakers, write in English, because the world is becoming smaller and English is becoming more and more important every day, especially for freelancers who are working with clients abroad. And then as a guest contributor, this is obviously my soft spot, because at Envision, I worked primarily with guest contributors for that whole time. So for me, I see the pros as working with someone who their whole job is to help you be a better writer and to get you paid. It wasn't coming out of my pocket. All I wanted to do was get designers more money. I want to help people do better work. And the exposure is fantastic. The Envision blog has around 3 million subscribers, give or take. So if you're talking about Medium, where your post goes out into the ether, or you're talking about a place like Envision, where your post goes into a weekly digest that gets sent to 3 million people, you can't compare. With that being said, there is a big con here, that you can say your post was hosted by Envision or wherever it is, but if that blog goes down, if a new editor comes in and doesn't like the post, if there's an unfortunate bug like we had at Envision where all the authors got scrambled up, so posts were attributed to the wrong person for months, then there's a problem. If you want control over your writing, and that's the most important, then being a guest contributor is not the way to go. But I think otherwise, the pros make it outweigh everything else. So the tips here for writing, you have to read, you have to find your angle, and also don't be embarrassed to ask for help. So reading, this is just like writing. If you want to write a lot, you have to read a lot too. Reading, especially for someone who's not a natural writer, will help you develop a more sophisticated language, and also it will show you what good looks like, and bad, which is equally important. So if you look into what is working, you'll see that the most successful posts are deep dives, and they're into very focused topics. So like what we read before, what we looked at before about guerrilla research, for example, and Tamir's post about design systems, you'll see very quickly that those are much more successful than posts about what is illustration. Those posts get really boring, and the further you get into reading, especially a specific author's writing, you'll understand how exciting a really deep, really interesting post can be. So these are some publications that I follow. And these are some writers. LaDonna's here. Hi, LaDonna. And then next, finding your angle. So what I mentioned earlier is that the best writing is writing that you know about, writing about a topic that you understand. So again, if we're going to go back to the design systems example, if you're not a design systems expert, I promise you someone is and someone's writing about it. Instead, take the time to figure out what you like. If you're like Pablo and you're into illustrations, or if you're into GIFs, anything you can add to your writing to make it more yours is a huge plus. Writing a blog post doesn't have to mean 700,000, 5,000 words. It can mean writing a few words and make it into a comic strip too. This is the internet. No one's coming to limit you. And asking for help is really important. For this presentation, I had to ask for help. The design looked but ugly when I did it myself. And I realized I'm not a designer. There's nothing I can do here without working with one. No one, including me, including all the writers I've worked with, is born a good writer. We all need help. I have a WhatsApp group with 2 very dear friends, and the 3 of us are writers. We go back and forth on lines and phrasing 5 times a week. Don't be embarrassed. Everyone is here to help, and everyone feels flattered being asked for help. So if you want, even if you're not sure that you're going to submit something to a magazine, ask for the editor to give you some input, because if you guys publish together, they'll be happy to have started earlier on. And even if you don't, it's always good to meet people. So the earlier you ask an editor to step in, from an editor's standpoint, the fewer rounds of edits you'll need. When someone would come to me with a fully written post with a great idea and not a great building blocks, not a great basis, like that doctor came to me with her user research post, I have a really hard choice to make about whether or not to scrap the post based solely on the writing. It depends on how much free time I have and how much energy I can commit to that, and not how good the topic is. When people would come to me really early on, however, and say they want to write about user research, like Lade did, and what kind of aspects of research could we cover? Or someone like Asta comes to me and she says she wants to write about UX hiring. This is her post outline. What do I think? That saves so much time towards the end. It's a lot easier to write slowly and edit fast than to write fast and edit painfully. And now we're at the portfolios part. This couldn't be more well-timed for COVID or coronavirus, or however you call it. I don't know how the rest of y'all are. I am very nervous about the job market, and this is a time that we should all be working on our portfolios and trying to help each other. So when it comes to writing about portfolios, there's 3 things to talk about: explaining your process, sharing your passion, and detailing collaborations, explaining who you work well with and how. So explaining your process goes back to what I keep harping on. You won't get hired for what's on the screen. You'll get hired for what you know how to do. So for example, Tal Solomon Vardi, he's an Israeli designer, and he's also founded his own community, and he's very active. He wrote a great case study about his work at KZ Radio. He was the head of design there, and if you see over here, he outlined all of the folks that he worked with on this project. And here I was only able to screenshot half, but he writes what he did on the project, who his co-stakeholders were, and what they found in research. Next is sharing your passion. All of us in our creative field have worked on projects that aren't, even if we're proud of the work we did, they're not the work that we want to keep on doing. When you build your portfolio by sharing the parts of your projects that you're the most proud of and you're the happiest to have taken part in, you'll show future employers what you want to keep working on and also where your strengths are. And detailing collaborations, this is the most important one, I think, when I hire people. It's really important to show how you can work in a team. Very few of us, if any, work our best alone. So when you can go into explaining how you've worked with others and what that looks like I showed you with Tal earlier, then you can show what a fully formed designer you are and what teamwork means to you. The more you understand what your personal strengths are, the more that you'll be able to collaborate with others and to know how to play nicely. So this is really important. Don't feel like because it's a portfolio or because it's a tough job market that you have to take everything on yourself. By taking the time to give other people credit and to show what your strengths are in a group, you'll win out in your portfolio writing. So thank you, and a very big thank you to Itamar Sagi, who worked really hard on this presentation.
שיינה, תודה רבה רבה רבה. כל מי שאיתנו, אני שוב מתנצלת על בעיות שהיה לנו עם הלייב בפייסבוק. ההרצאה הזאת תעלה מוקלטת לשם. ובינתיים שיינה פה בשביל לענות לנו על שאלות בעברית או באנגלית. אז למי שיש שאלה, אתם יכולים לכתוב לנו בתגובות. בבקשה, ליאת, מה השאלה שלך?
אני לא שומעת.
עדיף לכתוב לנו כי אתם מיוטד. בינתיים שיינה רוצה לספר לנו על שומר.
My favorite way to make fennel is to put it in the oven. No, my real favorite way is to have my husband do that. I'm pretty sure he's listening.
טוב, זה היה חשוב, אבל אני שנייה אעצור אותך, כי יכול להיות שאלה אמיתית, שלא ראיתי קודם. נועה שאלה כמה להיכנס לפרטים. אני מניחה שזה היה בהקשר של פרויקט ותיק עבודות.
So the question, I'm translating to English for the English speakers. I saw my grandma's here.
Oh, how much into detail?
How much to go into detail in a portfolio? I would say as much as possible. The more senior you get in a role or in the roles that you're looking for, the more important it is to show what you know and what you can do. So the more you can explain, especially for bigger projects, the better it will be. Obviously, if you're writing 1,200 words about a project in your portfolio, then it might be time to cut. That's not obvious. I don't know why I said obviously. If you're writing 1,200 words in your portfolio, then there's probably room to cut, but you can share 300, 400, 500.
Sorry. Okay. Let us speak in English then. Should we focus on one area in our portfolios, or should we show a variety of abilities?
I think that depends on what you want to do. If you want to be a design generalist, and there are a lot of people who do, then show all of your abilities. But if you want to focus on specific abilities, whether that's research or marketing design, it's better to focus on those and make it really clear about what you want.
Liat is asking, she says that she is currently doing a course and she's working on her portfolio, but she's not working within a team. She's doing all the projects herself. So how would you recommend her to show and talk about those projects?
First of all, kol hakavod, that's really hard work and good for you. You're amazing. You're a superhero. If you're really doing it all on your own, then there's no other story to tell. Let clients and future employers and friends know how amazing you are. When you start working with other people, it might be easier for you to take a step back and realize what you like better. But for now, don't be embarrassed. You're doing rock star work.
How do we get in touch with an editor in order to publish a blog post? That's a good question.
Oh, that's a really good question. A lot of people found me on LinkedIn, or they would actually write support tickets to InVision and ask who the editor is. Usually if you search on LinkedIn editor plus publication name, you'll find something. You also can look on their website to see if it's something like Smashing Magazine. You'll be able to find someone's contact button, or on Medium, you can usually press submit to and share your idea that way.
And Shayna, if I can add, if you're about to publish something in Israel, Create Magazine are currently looking for writers, and you can just approach them. We also have a post about it in the Startup Designers community. And Pixel Perfect Magazine is always looking for writers, so you can approach Sagi Schreiber or anyone else that you see in the newsletter. Okay, so Galit is asking, is it good to talk about personal challenges in a work process, or that are not specifically necessary to show the problem solution?
Nothing is specifically necessary ever. It's anything that you overcame to do better work that is definitely worth sharing. Whether it's the professional kind of personal problems, like learning how to work with a developer, or a more personal problem like working on a project that was just really difficult and it was in a difficult time. It's always worth sharing. The more personal, the more interesting stories. And I can share that the way I got my job at Envision was when I was the head of community at the new school. So also anyone who ever got a mail from Shayna at the new school, that person exists and it's me. I had a post shared on the Envision blog by the former managing editor, Kristen Hillary, about how I just had a really hard time working for 3 months as a freelancer. I was really depressed, and how I kept my business alive, but also bottomed out and came back up. Had I never shared that very personal, possibly unnecessarily oversharing post, I might not have gotten a really fantastic job.
That's awesome. So we have one final question so far from Shiran. She's asking regarding regarding collaboration, can you please give examples of good collaboration inside the case study?
Definitely. Again, if we want to talk about working with developers, explaining how the back and forth between you as the designer and the front-end developer went. If you worked with a UX writer or a copywriter, how you brainstormed ideas together. If you're on a design team, so what your role is within that team and how you worked with others. So for example, if you're a UX designer working with a videographer or a designer who specializes in video, how you were able to incorporate their ideas into your design. Anywhere that you played with someone else or that you worked with someone else, it's worth explaining all of the steps that you took to make their work and your work better.
Okay, so I think we're out of questions. Shayna, thank you so much. ותודה רבה. Thank you everyone that joined us. I'm sorry for the technical problems. At some point we'll overcome them. But until then, I'll upload this recording to our Facebook page. And again, you're awesome. Have a great evening.
Thank you everyone for coming.